What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Commissioner's Office podcast. My name is Daniel. Thank you all for tuning in. We have got another banger of an episode for you all today. So, summer is unfortunately coming to a close, which means two things. The weather is eventually going to get colder. In Chicago, it'll probably get colder by October, but then it'll be like 20 degrees in mid-October, and you'll just be freezing. But it also means the end of summer marks the start of a new football season, baby. The Bears are back, much to the fans' disappointment, but there is some hope because the Bears are 2-0 in the preseason so far. They won their first game versus the Chiefs. That was the home opener, 19-14. And they won the second game versus the Seahawks yesterday, at the time of me recording this, 27-11. The first game of which, the Chiefs game, is a little bit special to me because I actually had the joy of going to that game. It's the first time I've been to a Bears game since I think like 2014. I still have my ticket back when you actually had a physical ticket to things. That makes me sound like I'm 100 years old, but I still have my ticket when I went to that last Bears game. It was a preseason game versus the Chargers, and there's no way you'll be able to guess who was on that ticket, like the Bears player that was like the advertising player on the ticket, because most of my listeners probably wouldn't even have heard of him, unless you're, of course, me, because I'm a nerd. And of course, I know that the player on my old Bears ticket versus the Chargers that I went to almost 10 years ago was Patrick Mannelly, the former long snapper. So there's a bit of trivia, I guess, for you. But yeah, I went back to the Bears game versus the Chiefs. It was fantastic. We got a good win. We didn't really see a lot of the starters, but it was just fun to be back there. The atmosphere at Soldier Field is really good. There was a pretty solid population there watching the game. And, I think with all of the talk about renovation with Soldier Field and how the Bears might move, you forget that Soldier Field is a pretty good venue in itself. We're pretty lucky, and especially the location as well. Again, I can't stress enough how good the location of Soldier Field is. It is kind of a pain to park there, and then you have to walk 25 minutes away. But, at least you're getting your steps in. So, overall, it was a good experience, and I'll talk a little bit more about my experience watching the Bears at Soldier Field later in the episode. So, in case you didn't realize, the NFL only has teams play 3 preseason games now instead of 4. The last week of the preseason is just kind of a bye week for everyone to get ready for the regular season. So the Bears just have 1 game left. They've played 2 games. And so, the Bears being 2-0 in the preseason, it's the first time I remember they have done that in a while. I don't remember them being this good. But also, I kind of hear this debate all the time with not only Bears fans, but just football fans. It's, they'll see, one side will say, oh, the Bears, or basically any team, are winning. They're 2-0, so that must mean that they're doing well, right? And then the other side will say, no, these games are completely meaningless. Nothing matters in the preseason because the starters barely play. I believe here that there is a middle ground because I think I agree with the more cynical people on the preseason that the final score really doesn't matter. That is true. So yes, in theory, the games themselves don't matter, but also that's such it's not about the journey, it's the destination kind of mentality. So the way I see it, yes, of course, the final score is whatever, but a win is a win. You can't really take that away from them. Also, for people who say the preseason doesn't matter, I mean, I don't agree because these games do matter because we get to see how any team's depth looks. We get to see how the offense and the defense run, how coaches handle the game. Special teams is usually pretty telling because a lot of those players aren't subbed out over fear of injury or whatever. Like the Bears kept Cairo Santos in like the whole game. But also most importantly in the preseason, we get to see the new players debut. Of course, it's not officially their debut because preseason games are like statistically separate from regular season and postseason, whatever. But the new players, especially for a team like the Bears, because we have a lot of new players, the preseason is very important. I mean, for Bears fans in particular, if you're kind of skeptical on, the validity of the preseason and why it even matters, I don't know if you guys remember, we had this really tall guy on our team named Tariq Cohen for a couple years. He was pretty solid. That guy balled out in the preseason. That's kind of how we realized that he was going to be a good player. I had no idea who this guy was when we drafted him because he was like a 4th-round pick out of a small school. And I was like, who's this 5'6" running back they have on their team? And then I realized, oh, okay, he's actually pretty good in the preseason. It's not something that they figure out, talent-wise on week 1. So the preseason is important. However, it is important not to draw too heavy of conclusions or to get your hopes up or whatever the opposite of that is because of the small sample size. I do understand that, yes, it is good to see, what you can see out of the whole team. But yes, it is the preseason. It's not not the most, like nerve-wracking of parts of the season. So, what are my thoughts through week 2 of the preseason? You didn't ask for them, but you're listening to this podcast, so here are my thoughts. So, obviously, the number one priority for the Bears. How is our golden goose, Justin Fields, doing? In my opinion, he's looked pretty good. It's a little early to say how the new offensive system is complementing him yet, but he seems just more comfortable, which is very important, especially for a young quarterback. Also, even with his offensive line, which is a work in progress to say the least, he's actually running the offense and doing it with a little more confidence and certainty, which I think was something that was missing under Nagy. And that might not even have been the fault of the previous regime. Fields was thrown in there after, not expected to be the starting quarterback upon the time of the Bears drafting him. So that's kind of whatever. Maybe that's just a matter of a clean slate, but maybe it really is just the how much of a detriment the previous system was and how different the new one is. So, it's good to see that he's, kind of like taking the reins a little bit more. I think that he's made some really good throws and runs. That first drive versus Seattle last night, really good. He had some really solid throws. They moved right down the field. They kind of got stopped in the red zone, but, those things happen, whatever. Obviously, I think for me, the talent was never really a doubt. I think we've seen that Fields certainly has a lot of talent, but it's still good to see, him and the Bears getting down the field pretty efficiently. Also, David Montgomery has not played yet in the preseason. I don't think it's because of an injury. I think they're just sitting him out. But they were doing all of the offense with basically every starter offensively except for Montgomery. So that's, an encouraging sign. I think Fields is generally just making better reads. He's understanding kind of what the defense is showing and responding accordingly. Like a big play that the analysts have liked to go over so far is, you've probably seen it because the NFL has just thrown it at you, relentlessly, much to my enjoyment. It's the Fields had like a 20-yard completion to Darnell Mooney in the opener versus the Chiefs, which I actually saw live. It was one of the most beautiful things that man has ever created. But, on that play, like there was a guy coming in, there's a Bears player coming in motion to the left. Fields recognized that it was man coverage, so he knew that Mooney was going to have like a one-on-one when he was running that little like fade route up the left side. And so he read that play well, put in a good throw. Mooney made a catch, doing what he does as always, and, that was great. So I think on top of that, he just seems calmer in the pocket. Like a big issue with Trubisky was that he never really was sure where to put his feet and kind of would throw everything off his back foot. So far, this seems to be something with Fields that hopefully isn't an issue. seeing him play in person was really cool. Like, any doubts that you have over his talent were definitely erased. But it was also very stressful as a Bears fan because after every hit he took, we were all just sitting there like, please get up, Justin. We need we need you. His connection with Darnell Mooney has been there. They've had some really good link-ups over the past couple games, and he's just made some nice throws. So I think that so far he's, looked promising. Again, small sample size. He's probably played a total of like 3 drives this entire preseason. But, good stuff overall. Now, what about the other young players? The Bears have a lot of them. So the offensive line is basically all younger players with the exception of Cody Whitehair. They did sign Riley Reif. They did sign Michael Schofield. Those guys are 2 veterans. But I don't know. We don't know exactly where they're going to end up by the time season starts. My guess is they'll start, but, we'll have to see. So Tevin Jenkins is the big piece on the offensive line. He was the second-round pick last year. The Bears were rumored to be trading him, likely because he wasn't drafted by the new regime, so whatever, they didn't have a place for him. Last year, they tried playing him at left tackle, where he was not particularly good. Then they moved him to right tackle, which luckily was actually the position that he played in college. And he was definitely better in the preseason when he was playing right tackle, but they put him at right guard yesterday versus Seattle, and I think that's where, I hope that's where they settle him, because I think that's clearly the spot he was most comfortable in. The one thing about Tevin Jenkins is that, his strength is definitely run blocking. On pass blocking, he's certainly a work in progress, but run blocking, he's been really solid at, getting in space and getting the defenders out of the way for the running back. So I think guard just makes more sense for him. I think, though, for Jenkins, penalties still remain an issue. He had a ton of penalties last season when he was playing, and he also missed like the first 10 games with injuries. So like, whatever, maybe he was a little rusty, but those penalties have continued. He had a really bad, like, ineligible man downfield penalty in the Chiefs game that kind of like derailed the drive, which, I'm not trying to nitpick, but I think that that's kind of a little bit of an issue with him. But, that's something that I think is coachable. You can kind of draw that out of a guy if you, really get him to, understand the game and not have so many penalties. Other than that, I think the offensive line is definitely still a problem. But at least the Bears are like actually trying to fix it for now, because like they signed Riley Reif, they signed Michael Schofield in the offseason. Those guys aren't, Pro Bowlers or anything, but at least they're actually doing stuff, and they're better than the people that we have currently. For those of you who remember every single radio show that I've ever recorded, I remember I got like really angry that the Bears didn't sign like a bunch of different guards that popped up in free agency, over the course of the season, and then kept complaining about how bad their offensive line was. So at least maybe the new regime is a little bit aware of that and is like, okay, we have a problem. Let's at least, duct tape it for now and then focus on younger players later. For other younger players, I think offensively, guys like Treston Ebner, who's a rookie running back, I believe out of Oregon, he's looked really good. He's gotten the bulk of the snaps in the preseason because Montgomery hasn't played. Khalil Herbert they took out after a couple drives, so Ebner's gotten a lot of the work. In the Chiefs game, you can look it up, he had this like 30-yard run where he just actually snapped the guy's ankles. It was really cool. He's shown that he has a pretty good balance of like elusiveness and like strength as a runner, which is both qualities I think Montgomery has, and that's what hopefully will make them both good running backs. Daz Newsome, a receiver, I believe out of North Carolina, has been pretty solid so far. He's been a guy who's he hasn't really had a lot of playing time at receiver because the Bears receiving room has been pretty quiet, or pretty crowded, I should say, over the past couple years. He's been having more and more playtime now, especially in the return game where he's had some good returns. He did fumble a couple of times, but again, I think that's something that you can fix. He's made some nice plays. Another guy who I completely forgot the Bears even had on their team, Velus Jones Jr., their third-round pick, another receiver out of Tennessee. He's looked good. He's had some good catches, really good run after catch guy, and he's hopefully going to be a good receiver for the squad. Also, this is just a quick public service announcement / rant. Please stop all of the Velus Jones slander. Bears fans just consistently clown on this guy because he's a 25-year-old rookie, and they're like, "Ooh, why did they draft him? He's 25." It's like, okay, like, whatever. I get he's older for a rookie, but like, it's not like Brandon Weeden getting taken in the first round at 27. Like, it's like they took him in the third round, like, and also he's had like 2 40-yard returns, like, in the preseason. He's been really solid so far. Like, no one said that he was a completely unqualified player when they picked him. Like, if anything, his age was the biggest, like, concern, if you can even call it that. Like, who cares? Like, Garrett Bowles was taken at 24, was, like, by the Broncos a couple years ago. He's their left tackle. People said it was a terrible pick. It was for, like, 2 years, and now he's, like, one of the best tackles in the league. Like, whatever. Just, like, lay off. He's played, like, one game. Okay, PSA over. Also, speaking of special teams, our new punter is a guy named Trenton Gill, and he's like actually insane. We lost Pat O'Donnell, unfortunately. I think he signed with another team. And so, but Trenton Gill just waltzes in and wearing number 16, which was Pat O'Donnell's number, and is just punting the ball all over the place. Like, I had no idea who this guy was when I, watched it live at Soldier Field, and then he kicked it a bunch, and I was like, oh my God, like, this guy he's insane. The Bears drafted a punter in the 7th round at North Carolina State. He's a real one. We got a good punter. So that's always good. Always good to have a good punter, especially since the Bears are probably going to be doing a lot of punting. Moving on to the defense, we haven't seen too much of the new 2nd round corner Kyler Gordon, who's the rookie. We haven't seen a lot of him this preseason. I don't think he played in the Chiefs game. But when we have, he played in the Seahawks game, they didn't really throw at him a lot, which is a good thing. There are plenty of, corners who don't put up a lot of, good stats like interceptions or passes deflected, merely because their coverage is so good that quarterbacks don't even attempt to throw it in their direction. And he was pretty promising coming out of college. They most of the NFL analysts regarded Kyler Gordon as a pretty good pick at the time of him being drafted. So that's, a positive. Definitely the rookie that I am most excited about so far for the Bears is Jaquan Brisker, who's their new safety. They've plugged him into the starting lineup right away. He's playing alongside Eddie Jackson. He was another 2nd round pick at Penn State. He has been fantastic. He was all over the place in the Chiefs game. He was making a ton of open field tackles. He was really good at stopping the run. Like, he was in the backfield every single play. He was a pretty solid ball hawk as well, and he played in really good coverage, almost picked a ball off. Really good young player, hopefully, for the Bears. So, it's pretty promising. Again, it's really hard to gauge the rookies because a lot of this first draft for Ryan Poles, I think I mentioned this on an earlier radio show, was that he had 6 picks going into the draft, and then he turned it into like 11 because he just kept trading down, accruing more draft picks, and just taking more players, which, look, I don't think that's the best strategy ever, but it's certainly not the worst. Especially in the first year of a new regime, you're just, like, you can do a little bit of spaghetti throwing, like, with this situation, and that's kind of what they did. Although, with their first couple picks of Kyler Gordon, Velus Jones, Jaquan Brisker, they certainly were not just, going blindfolded into those draft picks. Like, it seems like they made those picks for a reason, and so far, I'm definitely not unhappy with any of them. So that kind of leads me into the final, branch to evaluate here. 2 weeks into the preseason, the coaching. It's very hard to evaluate anything really here for the Bears. It was good to see Matt Eberflus have a successful challenge in the Chiefs game. I think he correctly ruled that a fumble was indeed a fumble or something like that. So being good at challenges is definitely something that a coach needs to be good at. I remember Nagy was pretty decent at challenges, so hopefully he can continue that. One thing that I think flew under the radar a little bit that we kind of knew after the Bears hired their new head coach was that they were saying in the first couple practices, the Bears players were saying how rigorous Matt Eberflus's practices were, which I thought was really interesting because that was not something I recall hearing under Nagy. Not that his practices were soft or whatever, but it was whatever. It was, in the middle. But Eberflus, they're going out of their way to say it's harder than usual. I think someone said he was the most it's been the most disciplined and rigorous practice that they've ever seen as a player or whatever, which is crazy. That's good because it's important for the players to, be in good shape and whatever. And I don't know if I was just imagining it or whatever, it's nitpicking or whatever, but it did kind of seem like the Bears as a whole just were not as tired down the stretch of the game, especially versus Seattle. So I don't know, maybe kind of the tough conditioning aspect of how, the new head coach runs his team is paying off. But again, it's something that we're going to have to see deeper and deeper into the season. I think very generally the defense looked pretty solid all through the game, which could be a testament to, good coaching from the new defensive coordinator, Alan Williams. The Bears were forcing a pretty fair amount of turnovers. They weren't getting to the quarterback as much as they, usually do, but didn't look bad, definitely. As for the offense, I think that there's a little bit more to kind of learn about in the preseason than the defense. I think that the play calling from the new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, former Packers QB coach, I think the play calling generally seemed to be more focused around Fields' skill set, which is a good thing. They were getting him out of the pocket. They weren't just running everything as an RPO. They were actually throwing the ball to the tight ends. It's little things that Nagy just didn't do, or Bill Lazor, the old offense coordinator, just didn't really do, that hopefully the Bears are kind of realizing that it would be better for Fields' development to implement. The offense just seems to have a bit more fluidity to it. It's not so random. You don't want your play calling to be predictable, but under the old guard, it was kind of the play calling was so unpredictable that it was what are you doing? There's no rhythm. It's only when the offense goes no huddle and the quarterback kind of just starts to run everything himself that, surprise, surprise, the Bears would actually be okay. So, so far the play calling seems pretty decent. There are definitely some noticeable improvements in scheme. This just drove me so crazy. When the Bears had their different coordinators, that they would run all of these, screens and end arounds and reverses and whatever, which was good with the personnel they had, but not good at all in play design because they would just make them with absolutely no blockers. It would look like you were playing Madden basically, where all of the blockers just completely disconnect and then run off the field and you would get, decked behind the line, and just be who programmed this? The Bears aren't doing that. We saw a couple good end arounds in the first game. The Bears were actually running good, running back and tight end screens with blockers in front. So the scheme definitely just seems to be a bit more polished, which is never a bad thing. I will say the offense has been more conservative, definitely, but I would go out on a limb and say that's probably just because it's the preseason and they're only 2 weeks into a completely new system. So, that's kind of something you have to take with a grain of salt. overall, frankly, the Bears just seem to be at least a little bit better. They have one more preseason game versus the Browns next week before the home opener on September 11th versus San Francisco. So it's going to be very interesting, but so far I like what I'm seeing, but I'm I'm cautiously optimistic because, this is not supposed to be a Super Bowl team. Hopefully they are, but, I think everyone in the room kind of understands that it's probably not going to be like that. But hopefully there's a little bit of optimism here. Just as long as they re-sign Roquan Smith, I think they'll be okay. All right, so that is going to conclude another episode of the Commissioner's Office podcast. I know this is a bit of a shorter episode, but I really did want to just get my initial thoughts on the Bears before the season starts. Perfect segue as always. You know what else will be starting since school is about to go into session. The radio show hopefully will be back in the next couple weeks. I don't know about time yet. I don't know about what day of the week, but hopefully the radio show, Chicago Sports Unlimited, will be back for another banger of a year because we're going to have a lot of stuff to discuss. But until that day comes, thank you all for tuning in. If you like hearing me talk about sports, you can take a look at the Commissioner's Office page. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on probably anywhere that you can get your podcasts. If you have a episode recommendation, something you want me to, give my opinion on, please let me know. You know where to find me. And for now, I will see you all next time.